Welcome, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ines Yavad. I'm the global lead of the UN Foundation Next Generation Fellows, and I am thrilled to be your host for this exciting UN Foundation curtain raiser ahead of the Summit of the Future. As many of you already know, the summit is a week away, and it isn't just any big global moment. Today, we are the third precursor leading to the ambitious Summit of the Future. Can you feel the anticipation building? I know many of you have been counting the days, the hours, and the minutes to the summit. And guess what? It's been 3 years and 4 days since the Our Common Agenda was launched when the Summit of the Future was first mentioned. Not that anyone's counting. Let's just take a second to let that sink in. This is huge. It's like we've crossed 2 challenging checkpoints, and now we're revving up for the final stretch. Each global moment has brought us closer to reimagining our future. And this one, it's truly about thinking, what if we get it right? And building our once upon a future. So give yourselves a virtual high five because your passion and dedication have fueled this journey. Throughout this journey, we've mobilized over 100,000 young people for the Summit of the Future. We're not just observers here. We're the architects of tomorrow. And we're just days away from the summit that could change everything. Not that I'm being dramatic. Are you ready to take this excitement to the next level? Today's UN Foundation curtain raiser brings on the momentum from Pit Stop 2, which launched a major global campaign for the Summit of the Future. Now, with the summit just 4 days away, we're here to build further awareness of its ambitious outcomes and generate excitement for the adoption of the Pact for the Future, the Declaration on Future Generations, and the Global Compact for Digital Cooperation. This is happening in person in New York over the weekend and the start of next week, but we want to make sure that you get a sneak peek. Over the next 90 minutes, you'll hear from inspiring young people, global experts, and friends of the Engine Room and the Unlock the Future Coalition. Together, we'll explore how we can mobilize civil society, young people, and key decision makers to support the summit outcomes and contribute to a better future for all. We will also discuss how to secure stakeholder buy-in and translate the ideas of the Pact into actionable strategies. To kick things off, you'll hear from a fantastic group of changemakers who are using music to raise awareness for good. Following that, we'll have the chance to hear from visionary perspectives on the critical role of the SDGs and the power of collaboration across generations to build a sustainable future for both people and the planet. Next, we'll transition into our highly anticipated intergenerational panel. Globally recognized leaders will address key issues for the Summit of the Future, including SDGs and climate financing, the transformative impact of technology and AI, and the necessity for intergenerational cooperation. Expect visionary insights on investing in young people and shaping a sustainable future, as our panelists deliver bold ideas to rally diverse stakeholders and inspire real action. Afterwards, we'll be turning the mic over to you in our Q&A segment, before wrapping up with one of my favorite projects of this year, the Story Lab's first output, an animation series featuring Reem from Ethiopia. I can't wait for you to see it. Before we dive into our next segment, let's take a moment to reflect on the profound importance of our work today. We find ourselves at the cusp of perhaps the most defining decades in human history, where every action and inaction will profoundly shape the lives and futures of generations to come. This curtain raiser embodies the true essence of intergenerational collaboration. It's more than just people of different ages working together. It's about genuine listening, learning, and the exchange of ideas without judgment. That's what this curtain raiser is all about, sharing our visions and exploring how we can bring this future that we imagine to life. So, how do we ensure that people of all ages together come to shape this future at this monumental summit? Well, your presence here today, joining this movement for the future, is an excellent start. Together, we are voices uniting for a common cause. With that, let's turn our attention to a special message from the amazing kids from Kabin crew. The Kabin studio was founded in 2012 by Gary McCarthy on Cork City Northside. They are a trailblazing community of music and art that engages young people from diverse backgrounds through rap, singing, songwriting, and digital media. In 2024, the studio achieved global acclaim with The Spark, a viral hit by their young artist collective, the Kabin Crew, which amassed over 1 billion TikTok streams and 30 million Spotify plays, leading the performance at major festivals and recognition in prominent publications. Give them a round of digital applause.
Hi, I'm David and I'm 9 years old.
I'm Carly and I'm 10 years old.
I'm part of the Kabin studio in Cork.
My hope for the future is that all kids can express themselves safely. Equality for all kids, everybody treated the same, no matter how much money you have or where you live. Just because they don't have the money does not mean they don't deserve it. All kids have talent and they should be able to be who they want to be.
Once upon a future, there were more places like the Kabin studio all around the world.
Without it, you can do it like we do it, don't doubt it. Any obstacle, we find a way around it. If you're proud of who you are and what you do, shout it. Think you can stop what we do? I doubt it. We've got the energy, we'll tell you all about it. I searched for my spark and I found it. Everybody in the crowd start bouncing. Think you can stop what we do? I doubt it. We got the energy, we'll tell you all about it. I searched for my spark and I found it. Everybody through the day. I create my own way, feeling super slay. Express my art, that's how I communicate. In my imagination, never feeling out of place. Blast off like a rocket of the outer space. Living large, reaching for the stars. Let them all know us kids are in charge. Feeling awesome anytime I rap. Thoughts blossom when I'm on a track. Spitting bars, top class, full of energy, no cap. Crew no rhyme, islands on the map. Think you can stop what we do?
Wow, wasn't that incredible? The energy, the creativity, the passion of these young voices is truly inspiring. They have shown us that every young voice matters. That equality isn't just a dream, but a goal that we can achieve together. As the Kabin Crew said, all kids have a talent and should be able to be who they want to be. Their message resonates so powerfully with our mission here today. By discussing how we can operationalize the Pact for the future, we're building a future where every child, regardless of their background or circumstances, has the opportunity to express themselves safely and be heard. Speaking of looking into the future, this incredible performance leads us perfectly into our next exciting segment, an intergenerational keynote address. Just as the Kabin Crew demonstrated the power of youth voices, we're now going to hear from two inspiring speakers who embody the spirit of intergenerational collaboration. They will share their visionary outlook and the importance of the upcoming Summit of the Future. Without further ado, I'm absolutely thrilled to begin our keynote segment with a distinguished UN official. I'm sure you will already know who he is. It is my honor to introduce Undersecretary General for Policy, Guy Ryder, who he has graciously given young people time across the world and actually gave me some of his time in Chile earlier this year when I asked him tough questions at the Regional SDG Forum in Latin America. He currently shapes global policy and his journey is nothing short of inspirational. USG Ryder has been a champion for labor rights and international cooperation throughout his remarkable career. Welcome. I am incredibly excited to hear your thoughts on how you envision our future, especially in the context of the upcoming Summit of the Future and the critical role of intergenerational collaboration. I would like to pose 2 questions that I believe will help us understand the transformative potential of the summit, which aims to reinvigorate global cooperation. So, Guy Ryder, how do you envision the summit transforming our approach to the Sustainable Development Goals, and what role does intergenerational collaboration play in this vision? Over to you.
Well, Ines, firstly, thank you very much for having me today, and thanks to the UN Foundation for this wonderful curtain raiser as we, as you've said, approach the week as we run into the Summit of the Future. And I just want to underline something that you've already said. This is a big moment, and it has to be a big moment. Firstly, because the world is faced with an extraordinary array of pressing global challenges, and we need to construct responses to them. And secondly, let's be honest, the international system, the multilateral system, is also facing pressures. And the summit is an unmissable opportunity for us to address both of those things. Now, what can this summit do? Well, firstly, it can and it will bring together the leaders of the world. We're expecting over 130 heads of government, heads of state from our member states. And together, those governments are going to, we hope, adopt a Pact for the Future, with those 2 annexes, a declaration for future generations and a global digital compact. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about then. But not just heads of state, not just governments. We're bringing more than 7,000 civil society, multi-stakeholder representatives to New York. We have that number of representatives already inscribed. We're organizing events around the world, because one big thing about this Summit of the Future is connectivity, making sure that the UN is able to reach out to civil society, to people like yourselves, or those online today, and that they are able to input in a meaningful way to the work that we do. Now, what concrete results can we expect from the summit? Well, firstly, and you've asked the question in yes, one of the explicit ideas of this summit is to accelerate the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. We know we're off track, we know we're behind, we know that acceleration is truly urgent. And if you look at what's on the table at the summit in this Pact for the Future, we have terrific possibilities to bring about that acceleration. We can really make international finance work so much better for development. It's not working that way right now. We can turn technology to the benefit of all humanity. I think we're all acutely aware, and this gathering, this virtual gathering, is a demonstration of it, of the extraordinary potential of technology. But it needs to work for everybody. It needs to maximize the benefits. And we also have to take care of the real harms that can exist online and through things like artificial intelligence. And what about this intergenerational piece? Well, it's not by accident, Ines, that a large part of the Pact is directly addressing the needs of young people and future generations. It's sort of logical, isn't it, when we're having a summit to look at the future, that we think about future generations, we think about young people today, and we think how we can work together. The Declaration on Future Generations is aimed at working out how the decisions we take today can and should impact the interests and the rights of future generations. And as our action days taking place immediately before the summit, where multi-stakeholders will gather, the kickoff there will be a youth-organized event, a youth-led event next Friday afternoon here in New York. We need to give voice to young people. It's not working for young people. It's actually listening to them, giving them the agency, the possibilities for participation in decision-making nationally and internationally that truly matters. So if you put all of this together, and I have to be very honest, the negotiations are still going ahead full steam here in New York to get all of these results over the line. If you put all of this together, this Summit of the Future can really be an important moment. I tend to see it not as the end of a journey, it's a sort of a marker, a longer journey, because I think if we're able to land a powerful Pact for the Future with a powerful Future Generations Declaration, powerful Global Digital Compact, we're opening the door to new opportunities, new ways of making this world a better place for all generations, those who are coming towards the end of their lives today, and those who are to come in the future. So I'm really excited about it. I'm encouraged in particular by the way that this Summit of the Future seems to have resonated, not just in the negotiating halls here in New York, here in the United Nations, but amongst civil society, amongst young people. We had a fantastic civil society conference in Nairobi in Kenya in May, and I think there was a real buzz going there. We just have to keep the momentum going for one more week. We have to live up to the ambitions that the Secretary General has put before us. Really exciting, still lots of work to do, but thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I love how you didn't sugarcoat it. We know that we're behind and we need to accelerate, and the summit to do that. And as you said, it's not an ending point. It's a moment where we can really put a marker and know that 2024 was a moment where we changed our direction. I saw some people saying in the chat that they want to be a part of putting those pieces in place already. So that's really fantastic. Shannon, I was reading that from you. But we also know that the Summit of the Future aims to forge a new global consensus on our challenges. And you've mentioned a few of them on finance, on technology, and so on. From your unique perspective, having worked at the highest levels of international policy, how can this summit drive meaningful action on the SDGs specifically through intergenerational cooperation? And what is your vision for this long-term impact on people and planet?
Yeah, I mean, just hoping we have a good week in New York. It's not what matters most. I mean, we need to get these things adopted. We need to get a consensus. And believe me, getting a consensus amongst 193 UN member states is no small achievement. There are divided opinions. There are different perspectives. We know it. But let's hope that we manage to make this happen a week from now. It is only the beginning of the story, because everything, and this is my experience in anything that I've done, be it in my time in civil society or here in the multilateral system, getting a piece of paper adopted is one thing. Making it actually affect action on the ground, having it change people's lives, improve people's lives, and most importantly of all, opening spaces for participation is fundamentally important. When the Secretary General proposed this summit, he said its aim was to make multilateralism, of course, more effective, and people are asking questions about the effectiveness of the UN system today, let's be honest, but also more inclusive and more participatory. So I think we can judge the success of this summit, not just by the papers we adopt next week, but how we actually involve people and how together we make a difference in the current trajectory of policy making, which, let's be honest, if it comes to peace and security, if it comes to climate change, or if it comes to the whole panoply of the 17 SDGs, we are simply not doing well enough as yet. So to come back to that question, if we get this summit through, if we are serious about making international finance invest more in the objectives of the SDGs, and that's perfectly possible, if we're willing to manage technology so that it does act as the turbocharger of development that it is perfectly capable of being, if we're able to make strides in securing peace and security arrangements, because we know where peace and security does not reign, sustainable development almost becomes impossible. If we can move forward in all of these things, if we can also modernize our own governance structures, make the Security Council more reflective of the realities of today rather than of 1945 when the UN was founded, and if we're able to look at new and emerging questions, artificial intelligence is a classic case. We're even looking at the governance of outer space right now. That might sound a bit distant, but it's today's news because it really, really matters. If we're able to prepare the UN system to react better to global shocks, global complex shocks like the COVID epidemic, then we will be making real progress. But I insist again, it will be member states will be making the decision next week, but alone, I think we're going to fall short. So we need all hands on deck for this operation. And that's why this event and your engagement is so very important.
Fantastic. I can see so many people resonating with you in the chat. Esther was saying very profound. Harriet was just saying, thank you. Thank you for being with us. Nadia was saying, this is wonderful. I think we can see the true value of aligning intergenerationally with people who are working within and on the outsides of the UN. And if you may permit, I actually heard a briefing that you were saying, and I'll quote it back at you, but you were saying, I would underline the word action. But adopting a document is not an action in itself. It's a commitment to action. So I believe, just as you said it then and you've said it today, we need to continue this momentum even after the Summit of the Future as we continue to drive forward on the SDGs. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights on this vision. Your vision of intergenerational collaboration and long-term thinking is exactly what we need international cooperation and to tackle 21st century challenges and beyond. So now, to complement this global perspective with a powerful voice, we are honored to hear from Sai Surui. Sai is a powerful voice for Indigenous rights and environmental protection from the Brazilian Amazon. As coordinator of Canindé and the Indigenous youth movement of Rondônia, Sai is at the forefront of the ethno-environmental defense. Her role as an advisor to the UN Global Compact showcases her global influence as well. Sai will share her vision for how the Summit of the Future can enhance the role of young Indigenous leaders in shaping global environmental policies and how intergenerational cooperation can address critical issues like climate change and biodiversity conservation. Let's hear from Sai.
I'm Chai Surui, founder of the Indigenous Youth Movement of Rondônia from the Amazon in Brazil, an independent organization formed by more than 10 indigenous peoples from our state. Our goal is to fight for our rights, to strengthen the youth indigenous leaders who are already active in their communities and the youth, and to strengthen our cosmology, which are still under attack today. Today, we are facing the effects of the climate emergency that is drying up our rivers, increasing the temperature, and killing our plantations. That is why it is so important that our voice, the voice of the young indigenous people, can be heard about the global policies. We are the guardian of the forest. We are the guardian of the life. We cannot continue to be invisible. We are the solution. We are 5% of the world population, and we protect more than 80% of all biodiversity. We are the continuation of our ancestors, and we keep alive the ancestral knowledge that is so important to our people. We combine technology and traditional knowledge to protect our forests, to create the habitable climate, reforesting, creating agroforestry, and protecting the spring of water. Once upon a time, there is a future where we, indigenous youth and the women, could live and dream freely and safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sai. We were so glad to hear and be able to have this powerful and inspiring message. These words beautifully illustrate the crucial role of Indigenous people in global efforts towards sustainability and justice. As we've heard, the future is a story we're all writing together. Now, let's explore how to turn this vision into action. I am thrilled to introduce our next segment, the Power Panel, and this will be led by our CEO, Elizabeth Cousin, President and Chief Executive Officer of the UN Foundation. She brings over 2 decades of experience in global policymaking and has been at the forefront of diplomatic efforts and UN policy innovations. She'll introduce our distinguished panelists for Forging Our Future, SDGs, Climate Tech, and Intergenerational Action. This dynamic discussion will bring together leaders and young changemakers to explore the key issues and solutions we anticipate for the Summit of the Future, and she will provide an overview of the conversation ahead. Elizabeth, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Inez. It is such an honor to be here, to follow the extraordinary speakers we've just heard, to be in your good hands, and to be moderating this distinguished panel. As we've heard, the Summit of the Future comes at a critical time in the world when we need to bring new ambition and common purpose to face collective challenges. But when we face fierce headwinds and when our politics and our institutions need deep reimagination and renewal to be future ready. The Summit of the Future lays out a comprehensive agenda of issues that matter, from economic well-being to peace to intergenerational rights and justice. Especially coming as it does at a time of great turbulence, the summit therefore gives people around the world an indispensable opportunity, unmissable in Guy Ryder's words just now, to send a message to their leaders about the ambition they expect and deserve to secure their rights, their futures, and their possibilities. That's among the many reasons why I'm delighted to introduce this extraordinary panel to talk about some of what's at stake and what's possible. Let me first introduce His Excellency Ambassador Brian Wallace, Permanent Representative of Jamaica to the United Nations in New York. With an extensive career in national and international legal and administrative systems, he has held key positions, including roles at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda and within the internal justice system at the UN Secretariat. Ambassador Wallace has also served as a senator in the Jamaican Parliament, contributing to important national discussions and legislative processes. We also have with us His Excellency Dr. Chola Milambo. Ambassador Milambo, well known to many of you, serves as Zambia's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York. He also brings decades of experience in macroeconomic management and development finance, and is currently co-facilitating negotiations on the Global Digital Compact that we'll hear about shortly, as well as next year's critical 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. Joining them is an amazing young leader and friend, Ayesha Siddiqa. Ayesha is a Pakistani-American human rights and tribal land defender, recognized as a Time Magazine Woman of the Year in 2023. She co-founded Polluters Out and Fossil Free University and currently serves as a research scholar at NYU School of Law. We're also joined by Kelechi Echinonu, a Nigerian lawyer and justice advocate. As the regional head for West Africa at the Hague Institute for Innovation of Law Justice Accelerator, Kelechi has supported over 100 startups driving justice solutions. She is also, happily for us, a Next Generation Fellow for Justice at the UN Foundation, advocating for youth-centered approaches in political dialogues. And last but not least, we have Dr. Obiageli Obi Ezekwesili, a former minister twice over in her home country, Nigeria, a distinguished economist and anti-corruption advocate. Dr. Ezekwesili has served as vice president at the World Bank. She co-founded Transparency International and currently leads initiatives including Human Capital Africa and School of Politics, Policy, and Governance. And these are abbreviated bios of their extraordinary track records, all of our panelists today. With their permission, they are all exceptionally distinguished, but I will address them by their first names as we go into discussion. I'll direct a couple of rounds of questions to the panel, and then we'll open it up to questions from participants. Please feel free as we're talking to put questions in the chat. I see the chat is already incredibly active, so we'll try to get to as many as we can when we get to that part of our discussion. So for the first round of questions, I'll ask panelists to keep their responses to 5 minutes, and let's get started. To kick us off, I'd like to start with Ambassador Brian Wallace and the question of future generations, which is so pivotal to our conversation today. Brian, you have been co-facilitating the Declaration on Future Generations that we expect to be adopted next week. And you face the challenge of opening up an entirely new field of discussion at the UN about how to safeguard our societies and our planet for the future. What actions do you believe are most needed to ensure that the UN system can take a long-term perspective that safeguards intergenerational rights and interests? Over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you to the UN Foundation for hosting this already such an exciting event. It mirrors the energy that we have felt throughout the process of negotiating the Declaration on Future Generations. It provides a point of hope that we will start to do things differently so that we can achieve better and more efficient results. I like a lot of what USG Ryder said earlier, and I think he captured the essence of what we're trying to do with this entire Summit of the Future, the Pact and its 2 annexes, the Declaration on Future Generations and the Global Digital Compact. There is going to be a lot of work left to be done over the next few days to finalize all of these. but then the work really begins. And the question of how we give life, not just to the Pact and the Global Digital Compact, but for my purposes and my special interest, how we give life to a declaration on future generations. This is a new, as you indicated, a new era, a new way of doing business. The UN system is going to have to lead by example. So institutionally, there are going to have to be changes made to the way the UN does its own work to ensure that it is future-oriented, that it is leveraging all of the data science and research that is available, and then to use that with its advocacy platform to reach across the spectrum, to reach into civil society, as this kind of collaboration demonstrates, to reach into academia, to reach into the private sector, to make sure that the energy of what we're doing at the summit doesn't dissipate once adoption takes place on Monday or Sunday. But how to make sure that it is now implemented. Again, it has to lead by example, so the UN system has to reform itself to make sure that it is responsive and that it takes this longer term view. But the collaboration with member states will, I think, happen at a granular level. And the UN country offices are going to be an important, a vital component of how we give life to the Declaration on Future Generations, how its principles and policies, its commitments and actions are embedded in national planning and national decision-making across the spectrum, within country, at national and regional and local levels. There are the institution of the UN has a powerful advocacy role. There are provisions in the declaration, and hopefully it will be adopted, that gives the Secretary General an option to decide how that advocacy role is embodied. And we're looking forward to seeing that ramp up, because civil society alone can't do it, but the UN can help to make that push across the spectrum. It is important that the declaration moves from an era of seeing power and economic wealth as something to benevolently dish out. The hope is that a declaration on future generations embeds a way of thinking that demonstrates how all of our interests are ultimately tied together, and that economic growth and development across the globe is important for everyone, not just for some. I'll close there for the time being and look forward to any questions that might be posed.
Well, thank you very much. And I especially appreciated your point about the UN's needing to lead by example and the many ways that it can begin to do that. So we're talking now about the long-term future. One of the biggest questions is how that future will be shaped by fast-changing digital technologies. Ambassador Malambo Chola, I want to turn to you next. You have been instrumental in co-facilitating the Global Digital Compact. I think we'll have you spotlit in just a moment. That will be another critical outcome next week. Can you walk us through the main elements of the compact and what vision it sets out for our future? Over to you.
Thank you very much. And first, let me just thank you all for this occasion. UN Foundation doing a fantastic job as usual. And really just glad to see my friend Brian. Brian is doing fantastic work there. So thank you so much. Let me also just anchor myself on what you said in your preamble, really what is at stake and what is possible. And I think the question aligns with that. For firstly, what is at stake here is that we're living in a fast-changing digital environment, which requires that various stakeholders have a say in what's going on. There's so many moving pieces. There's so many unknowns at this point in time. And so we need a state of order and a state of cooperation to get this right. What's becoming clear is that we're seeing that digital is a great driver for economic growth. But if that driver is distributed unevenly, what we will see is that many countries will get left behind. Artificial intelligence clearly is one example where the fast advancements in artificial intelligence is really pushing countries forward, but leaving many countries behind. So we're creating this new dimension for a divide, in the sense that now that countries do not have equal data access and therefore not equal AI access, we're creating a new divide. And so the world is already unequal as it is, and we don't need to see that worsen. So I don't even think it's a matter of whether we really have a choice in this matter, because we're likely to see large inequalities if we don't respond, and we don't respond quickly. So 2.6 billion people are not connected right now reliably to the internet. It's a large proportion of the world. The GDC, the Global Digital Compact, seeks to try and close the digital gap. It seeks to also deal with the issue of inclusion, to ensure that all stakeholders are well represented. It also looks at the issue of human rights, make sure that we have protections for human rights online. We have a situation which I talked about where we have a fragmented data system, a fragmented internet. And so we're really trying to have 123 countries all subscribe to an action, a set of commitments and principles to ensure that we have a unified data governance system. And then lastly, of course, the GDC points out that AI can be a game changer. And I think that's what Guy Ryder said. It can really be a force for development to turbocharge the SDGs, for which we are very much behind. And so if for the first time we're creating a global framework for artificial intelligence through the UN. And I think it's important to point out that here at the UN, all countries have a voice. It creates a platform for various stakeholders to have a say. And so some headline issues you may need to take note is that one, the Global Digital Compact calls for an independent international expert panel to look at artificial intelligence. It advocates for the establishment of a global dialogue so that experts, stakeholders, member states can sit and look at what's going on in artificial intelligence. And then it also calls on the Secretary General to establish options for financing AI capabilities. One option could be a global fund on AI. And so those are the various issues that the Global Digital Compact is looking at. It places data and digital cooperation at the very center of what can be an effective multilateral system. And it caps up the document with a follow-up framework, which highlights what can be done, what different stakeholders should do, how it can be endorsed, and how we should have a follow-up on the Global Digital Compact.
Thank you so much. And it's exciting not only that the compact is close to fruition, but how practical the steps are that it lays out. It's a very exciting and important agenda for the future. And thank you for all of your dedication trying to bring it to fruition. Well, as we consider the future, of course, it's essential that we hear from those who will most immediately inherit it. So I want to move next to Aisha. Aisha, you're a prominent climate advocate, and your work bridges environmental justice with the youth climate movement. How do you believe we can foster stronger intergenerational collaboration in climate action, one of the most critical intergenerational issues we face? And how can the Summit of the Future be pivotal to this effort? I'd also just be interested to hear your views about strategies that can ensure that youth perspectives are not just heard, but truly integrated into key policy decisions and implementation. Aisha, pleasure to see you. Over to you.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having me. I think I can answer this question by just a little tweak to my bio. I'm no longer at the NYU School of Law doing research. I was actually doing research on the rights of future generations. I'm now a law student working on this as a project. And also, I'm in LA, so apologies if I sound a little tired. It's 5 in the morning for me. But to answer your questions, I'm going to advance on what Ambassador Brian Wallace said, and then also Ambassador Milambo. And the first thing on what we can do to ensure that future generations or young people are involved in this, and then more practical ways that we can impact the future. I think the future, especially from my background, from the human rights background, the climate background, it's more than just the things we leave behind for those that will come after us. It should be a planetary approach. We are seeing increases in climatic disasters. We are seeing increases in biodiversity issues, freshwater usage. AI is not just, the fact that AI is advancing or technology is advancing and it is putting a great deal of pressure on military capabilities, but also artificial intelligence is having a huge impact on our grid system, on our energy systems. Using ChatGPT for a couple of questions costs you a couple of gallons of fresh water, actually a few dozen gallons of fresh water. And so when we think of the rights of future generations, or when we even think about the Declaration of Future Generations, I think we have to take more than just the member states into account. With all due respect, I am talking to the United Nations, because you introduced me as somebody who's closest in proximity to future generations, and that actually is the fundamental truth. Young people are in the closest in proximity to future generations. So what is the way of best including them? Ask them what they think the future should look like. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but the way that I'm approaching it, and hopefully this work to Ambassador Wallace's point, the UN can push and merge with civil society, is something called the Tribunal on the Rights of Future Generations. We are having tribunals all across the world to ask the fundamental question: if future generations were alive today, what would they want? And we're taking a planetary approach for the reason that future generations have the right to live within planetary boundaries. And that don't just include, like I was mentioning, the climate, that don't just include our energy, but also take into account for war and peace. That is also a massive impact that we're going to see on future generations. And this approach that we're doing at the tribunal is one that merges democracy and democratic involvement with international processes. I think a declaration in implementation at the member state level, that can only be actually enforced when everybody believes that it is a right, when youth believe that they have a right to the future. And I think for somebody who comes from the climate movement, this is the thing I was fighting for. This is the thing I was sitting at the UN bench in front of HQ for 23 weeks, which was asking the United Nations, asking governments to ensure that my generation and the generations after me have equal access to clean air, clean water, so on and so forth. I hope I've answered your question.
Brilliantly, and thank you for such a powerful perspective and reminding us that how the issues are interlinked and how concretely we need to look at the issue of intergenerational rights and justice in very practical ways and with some new tools that we may need to develop. So thank you so much, and you seem very awake for being on the West Coast. I want to turn next to another young voice and bring in Kelechi. Kelechi, you have tremendous experience with peace and justice action, and we've actually just heard about that too. It's your area of professional expertise, and as we look to the summit and consider how to build more peaceful and just societies, clearly it's a crying need across our world. Can you share with us some of the key learnings that you've gathered from your involvement with experts, young people, and others, including insights into their aspirations for peaceful and just societies? Over to you, Kelechi.
Sure. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So just answering the question, and thank you for the question as well. In our conversation, I'm speaking for the Peace Action Group right now. We had a couple of insights and aspirations that came out of the conversations, and a big shout out to every member of the Peace Action Group. First off, there was a strong emphasis on inclusivity, and I think that I may in one way or the other be emphasizing a couple of points that have been pointed, especially by Aisha. So the first one was talking about inclusivity and the need to embrace diversity in all of its forms. So the experts that we spoke to highlighted the need to empower marginalized groups and youth, ensuring their voices are heard and involved in the decision-making process. Just like Aisha said, ask young people, ask the youth what exactly they want. We understood that this is essential for preventing negative outcomes and also fostering innovation among the youth, because we get to bring fresh perspectives. And I think this, and we believe that this is very important to solving complex problems. Secondly, would be intergenerational collaboration, seen as very important and crucial. There is a shared understanding that generations must build trust to creating lasting and sustainable solutions. So learnings from the older generations help us to avoid past mistakes, while bringing the involvement from young people creates that key component of new ideas, new energy. And, both groups need to work together to create an inclusive future to the ever-changing global landscape. Another learning that we got was about the effective use of technology. Now, we all agree, or we would agree, that technology offers powerful tools for advocacy, peace building, and local activism as well. And yes, its dual nature is recognized. One hand, it helps to amplify voices, bridge gaps, promote justice for us. But on the other hand, it can be misused if it's used by, or it falls into the wrong hands, leading to disinformation, cyber threats, and further marginalization, which we are all trying to prevent in one way or the other. And so it's essential to use, or we learned, it's essential to use technology wisely, to complement with real-world engagement and empathy. In terms of aspirations, youths are not just seeking transformative change in that sense, we are also the catalyst for it. And I would say that in asking us, or in talking to young people, we envision a future where our participation in politics and governance is meaningful, not just to check a box. I look forward to a time when we have a table full of experts, stakeholders, people in government, and the young person there isn't just tagged the young person, but actually with his or her name or their name in the tag. We want to see an inclusive governance structure that accounts for the complexities of global challenges, such as climate change, economic inequality, and also human rights valuation. There is also a need for peace building to be holistic, addressing the root causes of violence, inequality, injustice, and again, marginalization. So it's not just about preventing conflict, but also creating systems that promote equality, justice, equity, and the dignity of everyone. I hope that sort of answers the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelechi. And this point about meaningful participation, actual influence, integration into decisions in a true way, I think is such an important thread through all of these conversations, and very much essential to implementing anything coming out of the Pact and beyond. So now I want to turn to Dr. Ezekwesili Obi to explore the economic underpinnings of sustainable development and all the issues we're discussing, especially this critical question of financing. Beyond the summit next week, we're of course ramping up to the 4th conference on financing for development next year, which I'm sure Ambassador Malamba will ensure is a great success. You have such extraordinary experience in this area, and we would love to hear what you see as the most promising opportunities really to unlock finance in a meaningful way that can alleviate the debt burden on countries and really help countries mobilize the investments they need for sustainable development and equity. So Obi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And let me start by saying that every time I'm on a panel with the young of our world, I feel so elevated because they are the ones absolutely giving me energy these days. When I'm in the company of my generation, I feel like we have created enough problems, and it's time for us to just move over and let the young ones take over and find their solutions. I particularly want to acknowledge the things that have been said by Sai, the things said by Aisha and by Kelechi. I think that the critical connecting points for all three of them is, you want to solve the problem of the future, ask the people who own the future. And so I am definitely hoping that in the summit, that's exactly what will happen. And that the older ones, as a mark of a healthy intergenerational dialogues, will be in a listening mode, while the younger ones would be the ones telling us the solutions they see to these critical problems that we're faced with. I think that number 2 point I want to stress is how the kind of global public bads that we have to address today seem to make us not realize that every generation must carry its own solutions with it. And that this generation of the young people in our world actually already show us signs that they have ideas of how to solve the problems that we're leaving behind for them. And so ensuring that we're giving them the space to bring the innovation that are necessary, that is necessary for solving whether it's climate change issues or it is cyber terrorism or it's adopting, disruptive technologies, and how to ensure that we optimize the opportunities while reducing the risks, or it's just basic poor governance problems within society, or the democratic relapses that we see and the decline in democratic freedoms that we worry about. These young ones do have a pulse on some of the solutions. We need to connect what they are saying to what we think should be the solutions. Often I say that it is wrong to expect those who created the problem to have all the solutions. Otherwise, they would not in the first place have created the problems. And so the third point is specific to what you have asked. Usually, I say to people that my mantra is, in God I trust, but every other person must bring data. And so, I brought a couple of data in order to give us a context for the kind of really serious fiscal gap that we have in our world, and for which we must begin to think of how to create sensible solutions by asking the young, for whom we are living a world ridden with a lot of debt. And so from an Africa perspective, the Africa Development Bank estimates that Africa's total external debt stood at 1.12 trillion in 2022, and that by 2023, it had risen to 1.152 trillion. And this is a continent with an estimated GDP of 3.1 trillion, 54 countries, 3.1 trillion. Now, when you look at the tax to GDP ratio of the continent, it's at a dismal 15.6% or thereabout, compared to, say, Latin America at almost 20%, compared to the Asia and the Pacific at almost 21%. And so, or to Europe at 32%. When you look at this tax to GDP situation, it tells you clearly that domestic mobilization of resources for development, which is the first port of call normally for any country's development, because countries must finance their development. But when you look at tax to GDP ratio and you see it at this level for the continent, and it is also a continent that has a financing gap for the SDGs running into $1.17 trillion dollars. And so here we are stuck, literally. We're stuck. And if you looked at what's going on with ODA is declining because domestic constituency for ODA has really whittled so badly across countries. If you don't even know that, you should know that when you hear the anti-immigration rhetorics going on around the world, it is already suggesting that countries are feeling poor. And therefore, the voices of the citizens are saying, don't spend more money outside. Now, that being the case, what must we do? We can look at innovative financing from two perspectives. Improving the efficiencies and the results that come from existing resources, meaning that for every public finance in any of the countries with unsustainable level of debt, we do need to think of every spend from the perspective of efficiency. So how do we design the systems that enable the domestic resources to get to that level of results and efficiency? And then second would be to look at innovative financing as tools from the perspective of what additional sources of financing can we bring into the current mix. So in the case of Africa, for example, domestic capital market connecting to international capital markets and looking at how the private sector and private money begins to design a very interesting means of solving these development problems in ways that are attractive to the private sector without undermining the social needs of the societies. That's another approach to look at. I end on the note, because I know my 5 minutes is probably up. I end on the note on this as saying that there are some examples that we already know. So, for example, the kind of instrument that guarantees large-scale solutions to health problems. So, for example, the kinds of innovation that the Gates Foundation brought to the matter of HIV and AIDS, those kinds of ways of looking at new sources of money, but designing for impact, designing for result, designing for economies of scale, that's going to be important. And then final is that these young ones are really the ones pushing the innovation we see in technology today. In the world of finance, they are the ones thinking of how to convert problems into solutions and therefore into money that solve the problems. And as Aisha said, we must ask them.
Well, thank you. That was superb. And you have quite a strong fan base growing in the chat, I must tell you, as you've been speaking. I want to jump to a quick second question for each of you before going to some questions from our participants, and pose a quick fire question to each of you to bring some of these threads together. And Obi, this will, I think, translate very directly from one of your last points. But you've all reinforced in various ways that we stand at a juncture where our actions today will profoundly shape the world inherited by future generations. The Pact for the Future will soon be adopted, and I wonder if you could each take 2 minutes to share a quick thought on how we should approach implementation of the Pact or its annexes by various stakeholders, particularly young people. And I'm going to go in reverse order, if that's okay with you. And Obi, you ended on instruments for implementation, so I'm going to ask you any other thoughts on that, and then we'll go in reverse order.
I think that there are existing platforms of young people that are already so engaged in the civic demand for accountability. The greatest tragedy of most of our development commitments really has been the lack of accountability for results promised. And so we do need to unlock and build bigger tents of existing systems of holding countries to accountability as we look at the implementation phase of the Pact. And that would mean not going now as a bunch of wise old people to design some new mechanisms. No, get the young ones who already have all kinds of things through which they are engaging and asking questions, bring them to the mainstream of this implementation and let them design the approach that they can use, because technology is their best friend. And that makes a big difference in ensuring transparency, in ensuring effectiveness.
Wonderful. Kelechi looks like she might have just dropped, so I shall go to you and then back to Kelechi when she's back.
Sure. Implementation of all the things that have been done. I know that Jamaica has been involved in the Declaration of the Future, the Declaration of Future Generations, and also in co-facilitating this entire process. And I think I'm going to refer back to what Dr. Obi just said, that there are young people working on inclusion of young people. I know that for the Summit of the Future, and I'm just going to be a little bit critical, youth involvement is happening on the ground in person, but during the process, I think, especially as somebody who was involved in the process of submitting suggestions, there was towards the beginning a difficulty in getting our suggestions actually in the documents before they were negotiated. Anyway, so implementation. I think the tribunal that I'm working on is a great way to start said implementation, and I will reach out to both ambassadors after this call to see how we can work together. But we are from the Bahamas to the Arctic, from Pakistan to hopefully Kenya. We want to host said tribunals so that we can help define future generations. I know that that is a very, very contested issue among the member states, but I think among young people, we can find one definition globally. And then the second thing is that then we have to establish how no business, no corporation, no government, no party of any kind should operate in a way that harms future generations. And we as a society are harming future generations through our climate, through our development in war and technology, and so on and so forth. And I think because of this, we are actually also working on a People's Declaration on the rights of future generations. So let us see how this matches up with the one that is eventually negotiated at the member state level. I hope I've answered your question. I forget the last half of it.
So you have, and I really appreciate the candor about where there have been challenges in really meaningfully engaging in not just the process, but obviously in thinking ahead to follow up. Kelechi, your thoughts on next steps after the Pact?
All right. I think I would just echo what Dr. Obi has said and Aisha has said, so I don't need to repeat it. But I think that in as much as it feels exciting to have all of this going on, my response would be that we do not repeat mistakes of the past where we have all of this and it sounds really exciting and we're all happy, but it's just somewhere else in the shelf and we go on to the next shiny thing again. I'm hoping that we do things differently this time around, and all the amazing strategies that we've said so far and we have in the Pact, we really just move from theory to action. And we really, or I would say people in government or stakeholders actually involve young people, ask us questions and involve us in the decision-making process. I think that's like how I'll wrap it up. Thank you.
No, fantastic. Chola, I'll go next to you.
All right, thank you so much, and very interesting discussion. For me, I think the issue of next steps involves strategic implementation. And strategic implementation first means that you need to understand the documents that have come out, be very clear about what commitments have been made. This is an issue of the anchor for accountability. And then once you do that, you have to literally get involved in terms of a call to action. I would propose that young people try to cluster themselves around the various causes that are there. I know young people usually are put in a big group, but you have different ideas. So you need to identify different groups that align with what you're thinking. And then, so it's the issue of collaboration. And then once you have collaboration, you have to look for entry points. Where are those entry points, political entry points or technical entry points, where you need to have a say. And then lastly, as you do that, you make sure that you're doing so with consistent messaging. So it's a combination of issues. I would say strategic implementation, identifying where the clusters are, joining a cluster, collaborating, finding the entry points, and then lastly, be consistent in your messaging. So be strategic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brian, thoughts on this?
Well, thank you so much. Let me just address first something that Aisha said about the process. And I have to say, there is no group, no stakeholder in the entire process of the Pact, the Global Digital Compact, or the Declaration who feels that all of their interests have been taken into account in the documents that we're negotiating now. So everybody is equally unhappy. But having said that, we conducted wide-ranging consultations, and the consultations with the youth proved to be the most substantive, the most energizing, and the most helpful in developing our zero draft. So we have reflected in the document that we're negotiating, and we hope to close out over the next couple of days, significantly the interests and the issues that the youth have indicated are important. How we move forward with this in implementation is going to have to be through embedding systemically this intergenerational dialogue. And that is why this is such a critical part of the Declaration on Future Generations. It creates the commitments of member states to engage in that intergenerational dialogue because we recognize the importance of it. And that has to be done systematically. Now, we have to remember that approaching things from this futures perspective is new to many countries. They have no process, no framework in place to be able to take and give life to the declaration or the pact, the commitments made in the pact in its governance processes. So we're going to have to embed these things. And that collaboration with the youth, the energy that the youth provides is going to be critical in that respect. So again, that advocacy role is going to be absolutely important at the domestic levels. The member states of the UN now have the document, and the negotiation of these, the Pact, the GDC and the DFG have stimulated that process of thinking inside member states, because delegations here have had to go to their capitals for instructions on these things. So that process has started, and I expect that you will see this accelerated in country, in governments, and in the UN system, setting the example, as I mentioned earlier, and leading the advocacy on it moving forward.
Thank you all so much. And I'd like to now bring our audience into the conversation. We've received some excellent questions, and I'm going to distill a few of them. A couple of them are to a few specific panelists, and then a couple to everyone. And then we can incorporate it in a final round as we go. So for Chola, a couple of specific questions. I'll read out all the questions, and then we'll just go through colleagues to answer them as you wish. To Chola, how can multilateral partnerships better tackle Africa's digital challenges in particular, particularly in relation to limited infrastructure? And more broadly, what's being done, in your view, to ensure technological inclusivity for marginalized communities? To Brian, from your experience with civil society and experts, what do you see to be the most promising innovations for intergenerational solidarity that you've seen in these recent months? And what steps are being taken to connect NGOs with UN regional offices? So a bit more about the UN's presence in regions and what kind of role it can play. And to everyone, two interesting questions. One, how can we started this time together with such a powerful performance and call to action from our dear friends, and we want to look at the question of arts. How can we ensure that arts are recognized in the Global Digital Compact, Pact for the Future, or the Declaration for Future Generations? And then a final overall question to all of you: what's your vision for what's upon a future, and how will you use your leadership to achieve it? Now, you don't have to answer all of them. You can pick and choose. That's why I read them all out, so that you have the opportunity. Obi, I think I'm going to go first to you, if that's all right. Oh, there she is.
Hi, Elizabeth. I was trying to, I saw a question that was directed at me. I don't know the one that
well, if you see one that I didn't read, feel free to answer it.
Yes, it said, that question says, wonderful sharing of thoughts, Dr. Robbie, but one question: how do we root out corruption in governments across the world so that our youth do not perpetuate a cycle of corruption going forward? And also, how do we help alleviate poverty so that our youth have what they need to carry the future with pride and dignity? Well, very complex questions that could take us the whole day to dwell on. Let me just say that on the matter of, rooting out corruption, there are preventive measures and there are, sanctions measures. And in all cases, these exist both at domestic as well as at global levels. The UN has been at the center of some of the progression of the work that the organization that I was privileged to co-found with others around the world, the Transparency International, brings to the matter of tackling corruption. We normally say that the most significant antidote to corruption is transparency. Corruption, reduces when systems are more transparent, because when you have opaque systems and you have opaque opportunities, and where you have the cost of corrupt behavior being low, there's going to be greater supply of corruption. And so to prevent corruption, you need to make the cost of corruption to those who indulge very high. And that requires building systems of governance that can actually do that. And that's where the problem lies. Because it is much more difficult to get good governance across the world. But the active engagement of young people in demanding for good governance has also been found to be a very important pathway to improving governance and accountability. And then to close out on the question, which I was trying to fully understand, if you would repeat it again, the one that you say is for every one of us.
Well, just what's your vision for Once Upon a Future? And how do you see in your own life and leadership what you will, I mean, you've done so much, what you will continue to do to try to advance it?
I want a future where the young ones are fearless. There's something about fearlessness. It really just unlocks opportunities that people did not even imagine. And that fearlessness means that the young people are ready to get into themselves and to at least understand the importance of three things. I want to see a world of young people where they understand that the three most important resources for solving the problems of the future would be, one, partnerships. And I see across the world more and more joint teams of young people, whether in the civic space or in the business space. I'm saying that more. They should deepen their partnerships. Partnerships, huge resource and number one resource for me. And then number two resource is knowledge. The young people have no reason to have any asymmetry of knowledge today. It's easily available, especially once we can get them to have foundational literacy and numeracy, which is my greatest problem right now, that 9 out of 10 children in Africa are not achieving minimum proficiency level in literacy and numeracy. 7 out of 10 children in the world are not. That's not good for us as a world. So if we can get literacy, then the search for knowledge, the quest for more knowledge, for how to solve problems, for how to do things will be available to our young people. And third, the financing. And that's what we were discussing. The young people are going to look at the asset and the liability of the world that's been handed to them, and they need to figure out how instruments that are innovative can bridge the gap. And I have the utmost confidence in the future because of the young.
I love that transparency, which, by the way, is absolutely essential for accountability as well, and fearlessness. That's wonderful. Chola, let me go next to you.
All right, thank you so much. So I had two questions. One was on how can we use multilateral systems to support Africa's closing the digital divide in Africa, including infrastructure, limited infrastructure, something in those lines. And then the other one was, how do we address the needs of those in the multilateral, of marginalized communities? So let me try and tackle both. Firstly, I think one fortunate thing that Africa has going for it is that it's the only continent that has followed through the Global Digital Compact with its own African Digital Compact. So I think that's a really good starting point. Under the Africa Union, they've developed the Africa Digital Compact. So we need to see that one coming to fruition and into implementation. Africa faces several challenges. It has the largest digital gaps. It has the highest cost of internet. Most areas are blacked out, and it really even goes as far back as having inadequate energy supply. Many countries are going through a crisis. My very own Zambia, because of climate change, is having only 3 hours of power a day. And you can imagine trying to get an economy going or any people educated in a situation where you only have 3 hours of power in a day. So there's critical infrastructure need there in Africa more broadly. But it speaks to also the issue that Dr. Obi raised on the issue of financing. And we need to ensure that there's adequate financing for Africa's infrastructure. It's a long-term investment and requires low financing because of the long gestation periods of infrastructure projects. It needs a concerted effort. So it gets into the issues of concessional financing. It gets into the issues of innovation in financing, which Dr. Obi raised. We need to get into all those issues so that private sector can help finance domestic needs under the SDGs. So it's an alignment between the financing and the domestic finance needs in development. We need innovation in the tech space. For instance, just to get people to get connected, you can use what they call low orbit satellites. We need connectivity through broadband, and so we need to have cables. And some companies are already running cables from Kenya all the way to South Africa, and that may be helpful. We also need to push what they call digital public infrastructure that's captured in the Digital Compact. So all these different innovations and commitments that need to be followed through. On the issue of marginalized communities, I think it also relates because you have to understand what are the barriers to access. One of them is really the cost of connectivity, which is many times higher in many countries where you have marginalized communities. And also the issue of digital training capabilities. You need to have digital literacy to try and close these gaps. In the Global Digital Compact, we identified that some marginalized groups need special training, custom-made training towards those groups, and that's probably one way to go about it. Also, what's coming out more recently is that when we talk about large language models in AI, we are actually seeing communities getting left behind. And so the issue of inclusivity to ensure that domestic languages, indigenous languages don't get left behind, the training of these data models becomes a very important issue. And therefore, the issue of inclusivity becomes a cardinal part of the strategy to address marginalized communities. Let me leave it there. Maybe there's the last question, the generic question.
And for one.
Sorry, you're muted.
Well, it's what's your vision for Once Upon a Future and
Once Upon a Future is a much more equitable society, because a lot of the issues that we're talking about here talks about inequalities, whether it's in the environmental dimension, whether it's in the peace and security with the Security Council, whether it's development, and whether it's digital. We really live in a fragmented world, and many of the issues that we're trying to respond to reflect what you call a market failure, whereby systems by themselves are either outdated or the market doesn't provide the right price to find an equitable distribution of resources. So a more equitable society is what I would say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kelechi, I'll go next to you, and then to Brian and Aisha.
All right, so I'll answer the question around my vision for Once Upon a Future. So my vision is one where justice is accessible and affordable to everyone, especially vulnerable communities. And I'll cap it by saying a future where older generations are very proud of the kind of planet they're leaving for future generations. Thank you.
That is a beautiful sentiment that is also quite a challenge to those of us who are in the older generation part of the category. Brian, over to you.
Well, thank you so much. Just to start with there, my hope, and this is what underpins the work that we've done on the declaration, is that if we look far enough ahead, we will begin to understand and appreciate that ultimately all of our interests are connected. There is not a global north interest that is disconnected from the interests of the global south, and vice versa. So if we look far ahead enough, the issues that divide us now start to dissipate. They start to lessen in importance and significance. And if we're able to embed that change in mindset, that different way of thinking, that different way of implementing policy, then we will be off to a more equitable, as Chola said, future for all. To respond specifically to the question of how we can give life and implement, as I mentioned earlier, the UN country teams are a vital resource. They are under-resourced at the moment, and we're hoping to find solutions to that challenge here at the UN. But one of the things, for instance, that we did recently in Jamaica is the country team, in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, organized a youth dialogue on the Declaration on Future Generations and on the Summit of the Future. So we are starting already to embed that kind of thinking across the society in these ways. Government, civil society, UN agencies, youth, already coming together to make sure that we are getting that new way of thinking. Now, there's one way to drive political change, and that is to have the voices of the young, the energy of the young felt in political circles. And that kind of engagement is going to be critical. But the UN country teams are going to be critical in terms of supporting governments in implementation, in conceptualizing, in building out frameworks, and in implementing. So thank you.
Thank you. Aisha, to you. And while you're answering the question, I'm going to come back to each of you for just a one word that you'd like to leave everybody with when you think about the Summit of the Future and beyond. But Aisha, to you.
Well, thank you for allowing me to have the last word. So I'm going to answer my hope for the future by saying what I hope it is not. And I'm gonna fulfill my duty as a youth on this panel by asking and pushing just a little bit. I think it's not enough to have envoys for the future at the UN level and envoys for the youth and these diplomatic or political officials representing arrangement of a population for the sole purposes of symbolism. I'm currently working with a new youth envoy, and there's many initiatives he's pushing, and I think it's amazing. But I would be really discouraged if there is a youth envoy. If there's an envoy selected for future generations that establishes committees on future generations and so on and so forth, but is that is completely unconnected with the future generations, and those are children and youth as young as 4 years old. And I think more precisely, what I hope is in the future is that the future generations have a right. I think we need to establish a legal right. At the ICJ right now, there is a AO that has been presented, and it's been asked by young people from the South Pacific. They're asking the International Court of Justice to define define state obligations per human rights to climate change, and then state obligations to future generations per climate change. And I think in the definition that will come out of the ICJ, we can more clearly have a definition on the right. Youth are the biggest stakeholder. I think this is incredibly important. Yes, there are government stakeholders and there are corporate stakeholders and private stakeholders, but for whom? For the children that will come after us. And youth represent everybody from the north to the south, from different ethnicities and classes and races. They unify us. And so not only are economic systems outdated, I think our international systems are really outdated. I think we think that the way that we have approached issues in the past are the ways that we can approach issues in the future. And I think we need to get a little bit on the urgency end of that. Just like AI is innovating at the speed of light, I think we need to start innovating our ideas also to catch up. And the way that we currently have our long, tedious, bureaucratic mechanisms to ensure a kind of democracy. I don't know if they're ensuring a kind of efficiency. So thank you for letting me say the last word. Thank you.
Well, everyone's going to get one last word because I do want to go to each of you and ask you to offer one word to leave our audience with. I will just tell you the order: Chola, Brian, Aisha, Obi, and Kelechi. So Chola, one word.
Yeah, lifetime opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity. This is Summit of the Future is the future to have. Your must get involved. If you haven't If you know people who are not involved, let them know that we have the Summit of the Future taking place. It is a big deal. It's covering a lot of issues, but it's really just the beginning of the process. Like USG Guy Ryder said, there are a lot of things in there. It's not the end, and we have an opportunity right now to really make that big difference in multilateralism. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
I thought it was one word, but hopefulness.
Wonderful.
Hopefulness.
Obi, if you were still with us, one word.
Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Oh, lovely. I couldn't think of one word, but just the future.
That's good. That's a good one. Aisha, and then Kelechi, you will have the last word.
Partnership.
Partnership. And Kelechi.
Open-mindedness.
I love that. This has been just such an extraordinary panel. All of you given so much in your lives and work, and you've given so much thought to us here today in the last hour. I'm enormously grateful to all of you and to the audience. I'm just so struck. We know what's broken. We know what's required to fix it. I love this idea of looking far enough ahead that differences fade and what you see is common purpose and common values and commonality. And this theme throughout everything, asking people what they want and acting on it. And it's not just young people, asking people what they genuinely want and trying to get to work, which is really what's required. I think we know what we need to do. And you've given us such wonderful ideas, such an opportunity with the summit before us as a platform, a jumping off point. And just want to thank all of you enormously for your collective insights and for being with us here today. And we're actually on time. So with that, it is my great pleasure to pass the mic to Reem, who will share her powerful story through a thought-provoking animation that calls on all of us to act now for a common future with urgency, responsibility, and hopefulness. Reem, over to you.
So thank you for the introduction. I'm excited to share with you an animation that's very close to my heart. It captures not just my personal story and not just my personal journey, but also the urgent call to action we all face. This animation reminds us that our individual stories are part of a larger collective narrative. And as you watch, I invite you to reflect on your own role in shaping our common future. So without further ado, let's dive into the animation.
Hey there, my name is Reem and I'm 18 and living my best life in Addis Ababa with my amazing mom. I love getting lost in books and binge watching movies. Rom-coms are my biggest love. They make my mom and me laugh so hard and brighten our days. My life's a wild balancing act of school, chores, and running the Gender Equality Club. Oh, and cannot forget chemistry. I'm totally obsessed with it. It's my vibe. I'm also really into this project called She for Climate. It's all about helping girls become leaders and standing up for our planet. You know what blows my mind? 70% of us in Ethiopia are under 30, and I am one of them, and I've got big dreams of becoming an environmentalist. I want to build my own NGO, helping girls and women with climate change, education, and equality. But my journey hasn't been easy. Climate change has taken a toll on our finances, making it harder to pay for my education. We moved to the city, away from our family, so I could go to a better school. One time I got the opportunity to go to a really good high school, but I couldn't because of the extra expenses. We rely on crops from our relatives in the village, but the unpredictable weather has cut down the harvests. Our crops failed and we had to dip into our savings just to survive. It was heartbreaking. I worry about getting a job one day. Right now, I'm 18 and I dream of better education and healthcare for everyone. But I worry about what will happen if we don't do anything. What if everything falls apart? What if leaders don't act for a better world? Our environment will deteriorate, schools and healthcare will fail, and poverty will spread. We'd be stuck in low-paying jobs, dealing with economic collapse. No matter how much we try, we are unable to change a thing for our children. But I'd like to think that we still have time. And imagine, what if we get it right? Imagine if world leaders today do the right thing and invest in good governance, social protection, clean power, and new technologies. To make my future bright, Ethiopia is doing just that. It's focusing on important goals like ending hunger, providing affordable and clean energy, and building sustainable infrastructure. By achieving these goals, my life and the lives of many people like me have changed for the better. When electricity reaches more homes, when every child has 3 meals a day, and everyone has access to basic services, we all dream bigger together. In 2044, at 38, I have my own NGO helping girls and women fight climate change. I mentor young girls, helping them become leaders. Ethiopia's economy is booming thanks to the huge leaps in innovation, climate tech, public transit, and internet. Our farmers use smart agriculture, ensuring food security for all. With the Sustainable Development Goals achieved, over 1.6 million people are out of poverty and our country's debt is slashed. My life and the lives of millions of others are transformed. This means more young people like me have a chance for a better future. More importantly, it means leaving a legacy worth inheriting for future generations. In 2100, my kids are all grown up, happy and chasing their dreams. With the right opportunities and people who care, Ethiopia is a beacon of resilience and innovation. This is the future that I want, a world where we can dream freely. United, we can solve big problems and create a world where everyone thrives and no generation is left behind. Let's act now for our common future.
Wow. Wasn't this amazing? I can't hide my excitement to Reem's story being shared with you all and the work of a whole team to make this happen. Thank you for your attention during this powerful piece, which calls us to act for our common future. It portrays the urgency, and you've seen it in the chat. People were saying it's inspirational. They're loving the animation, but we are coming to the end of our curtain raiser, and there is much more to come. At the UN and its surroundings this weekend in just a couple days. If you will be around, please do join us as we hear from girls about their visions for the future, as we dive deeper into how we can go from words to actions. The details are already on our website, and so as not to miss anything, make sure that you're following us on Instagram, Facebook, and our newsletter for further opportunities. I'm looking forward to seeing how we all build this once upon a future together. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to all our panelists, to all the over 200 people who joined us today. And I will see you very soon as we work towards getting it right. Thanks, everyone. Have a lovely Monday.
Everybody in
Thanks to everyone who's still there. We will close the call very soon now and see you soon.